What's up, guys? I want to hit on something that I get asked a lot, and that is, what do I think is stronger, a frame lock or a liner lock? I get this question a lot, and it's a question that pops up on the forums a lot, and there seems to be a lot of conjecture that gets repeated constantly, and it's repeated so much it just becomes a widely accepted fact when really there's no factual based information that perpetuates that idea. It's just something that people hear and they think, okay, well, that makes sense, and then they accept it as fact, and then they repeat it, and then it's just a vicious cycle of misinformation being spread around about frame locks and liner locks. For some reason, people have it in their head now that frame locks are uber strong and liner locks are weak and will fail and are no good. Really, that's not the case. I'm going to go ahead and say I believe that most liner locks and most frame locks are about equal in strength. I'll explain the reason why. But honestly, I've gotten to where I prefer a well done liner lock instead of a frame lock. Frame locks are good, but on most of them they're built in such a way that when I grip the knife, I'm actually pushing the lock bar in further. It's not a huge problem if it unsticks and you only do it a couple times, but say I'm going to use a knife hard and I'm gripping the lock bar. Let's say I use my knife every day and I grip it hard every single day and I'm forcing the lock bar to push in. Let's use the Sebenza for an example. Let's say I'm gripping the knife hard, and yes, it happens on a Sebenza, although this is one of the most minimal ones that the grip on the Sebenza doesn't lend itself to having this problem. But I'm going to use it as an example. Let's say I'm gripping the knife hard and I'm forcing the lock bar in towards the non-locking side, which will happen on pretty much any frame lock. You are causing major excessive wear on the locking components. You're not going to wear the blade so much, but you are going to wear the titanium, and it's going to gall. And you forcing the lock bar over tens of times, possibly hundreds of times over the life of the knife, or the very short life of the knife in this case, you're going to cause problems with the lock. It's going to develop lock rock, it's going to gall, it's going to stick. And that's inherent with frame locks. There are not many frame locks that you can grip extremely hard and not force the lock bar in. They have to be built extremely well. Even the Hinderer does it, although to a minimal extent. The Hest has it. They all do it. They all do it. The only frame lock I've ever seen that has been totally exempt from this problem is a Tim Gallion Junkyard Dog, which is here for sharpening, and that's the reason it's taped up right now. You absolutely cannot push the lock bar in at all because it is built extremely well. This is not my knife, so I'm not going to really romp on it, but as you can see, putting pressure, it's not moving at all. Unlocks perfectly. I don't know, let's grab one that will move. Alright, let's get the Hinderer, since this seems to be a lot of people's gold standard. Watch the lock bar. See it? Pushed in. Sticks. But that's where it rides most of the time. If I'm using this knife and I'm gripping it and I'm forcing it in all the time, every day, I'm going to cause an extreme amount of wear on the lock, and it's going to cause it to eventually be non-functional. In essence, it's going to be non-functional in a shorter amount of time than if you weren't pushing in the liner lock just when simply gripping the knife, or the frame lock when simply gripping the knife. Liner locks solve that problem. Spyderco Military, grip it as hard as you want. You're not forcing the lock in further. Grab any liner lock. They're all done like that. The Blur, you're not gonna. Your force is exerted on the back of the scale and not the lock itself. You're not going to cause excessive wear, and a lot of the times liner locks can be more solid than frame locks. It's hard to find a liner lock with play unless it's like an Emerson or something that has worn down. Now, the whole thing about liner locks and frame locks and strength is you have to pay attention to the actual lock itself and how it's built. You've heard the saying, I'm sure, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. Well, that's true for frame locks as well. You see this big beefy locking bar up here, and that looks great. It looks like, wow, that's really strong. That's amazing that you have that much substantial titanium there to prevent the lock from failing. Well, that's not really true, because this is what's going to fail because it's the weakest link. And as you can see, it's fairly thin. You have eaten out a whole lot of that titanium in order to get the lock to function. If this was full, then you would never be able to unlock the knife. It would be so strong, the tension would be so strong that it would be impossible to manipulate the knife. They have to cut out the frame locks like this in order for them to function, and they're all like that. They all have varying degrees of thickness. As you can see, the Hest is fairly thin. Chris Reeves are actually on the thicker side. They leave a lot of meat in here, and they're good. They're the best rendition in this case with the cutout. They're pretty much the best. ZTs, as you can see, pretty thin, right? Pretty thin. Well, let's take a liner lock and let's compare that. In this case, I'm just going to grab an Emerson. This has a fairly thin liner lock. This is on the thin side for a liner lock. Let's compare the liner lock down here with the cutout in the frame lock. The liner lock is actually thicker, so it's going to be stronger. This may not make sense to you guys, but just open your mind a little bit and try and see it from a different perspective. I'm not going to say it's going to be stronger. I have no science to back that up. So let's revise that statement. This is going to be as strong. It's going to be just as strong as the Hinder's frame lock, because essentially this has a weakened spot that is actually thinner than the whole lock on the liner lock. Also, I want to point out that this gives a stress point for this to buckle. This has no stress point for it to buckle because it's not thinned out in any spot. It's just going to have to pick a spot and warp, which it would take a whole lot of force to do. It's going to take a whole lot of force to do that as well, but this just has a predetermined spot where it's going to fail. This doesn't. That doesn't really play a role in strength. Just wanted to point that out. But as you can see, they are a little different size. The Emerson is actually a little thicker. So in essence, even though this doesn't have a huge beefy thick locking bar up where the Tang is, this is in essence just as strong as a Hinder's frame lock because the titanium has the same thickness. Lock strength is all about this thickness down here and how this is done. All this up here is not, I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but you could have this being 10 mil thick and this being a half a mil thick. It doesn't matter. This right here is what's going to fail. This is what matters. So it doesn't really matter how beefy your frame lock is because you're always going to have this cutout, and most of the time it's going to be thinner than just a solid liner lock. And again, the Emerson is on the thin side for a liner lock. There are other beefier liner locks. This is on the thin side as well. I would say these two are about the same. So which one is stronger? How can you tell me this is stronger than this? Actually, this would be stronger. This would support more weight because it's steel. It's less likely to fail because it's steel. So that's the reason that I don't care a whole lot for, well, let's not say I don't care a whole lot for frame locks, because obviously the majority of my collection is frame lock, but it doesn't matter so much to me if it's a frame lock or a liner lock, and in some instances I actually prefer a liner lock just because I'm not forcing the lock closed while I'm gripping the knife. Just for the sake of variety here, I'll get the tilt, show you. See, fairly thin, really thin. I don't have a micrometer. I wish I did. Then I could do a lot of side-by-side comparison with this, but it's just not going to be stronger. It's inherent in the design. It's not going to be any stronger. It looks like it's going to be stronger, but in reality it's not. As you can see, the military has a pretty thin liner lock as well, but it is just as thick as the thinnest part of this titanium slab, and this is steel as well, so it's going to be stronger. It's all about perception. People perceive these big chunky lock bars as being stronger, so that idea gets perpetuated all across the forums, and I kind of hate seeing it because a lot of knives get disregarded because they're a liner lock when it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. Liner locks and frame locks, they're both strong. I prefer liner locks because I can't damage the lock when I'm gripping the knife. I think that's a design flaw in frame locks. I know some people don't have a problem with it, but the way I grip knives, if I'm using this hard, I'm pushing the lock bar in, guaranteed. It just happens. So anyway, let me know what you think, guys. I'll probably get flamed over this video too. I seem to give people truth enemas and they get butthurt about it. So I think I'll probably disable the like-dislike feature for this video for the first day or two. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.